I don't have any. I don't have any specific questions, but I figure someone's going to have something that I'll
Yeah.
find useful. So
There may be a few moments of brilliance that we'll be glad that we caught.
yeah.
All right. Well, now that I see that Jeremy is like a week ahead of us, but that's no problem. uh, so I have a couple of questions. One might just be some items on MySQL, just like some definitions and finding some places there.
Yeah.
Just because it's just hunting and pecking. And then another, I was doing the game with the Ninja and the Pirates. And I had some questions about trying to make that more interactive.
Okay.
And instead of just, I'm doing pretty good, just only created like one other interaction, if you will. So I was just looking to find out how to, maybe my brain's just not thinking that way of how else can this pirate and this ninja interact. So,
sure. If you, would you mind sharing your screen?
Sure.
Can't recall which assignment that is. Is this a core assignment or is this a practice? What is?
Actually, it was a core assignment. So is that a bad thing?
No. If it's a core assignment, that's great.
So it should be up there right now. Right.
Right. Okay. Great.
And I mean, I just did this other one here of jump kick. Let's see. We'll go back to attack and jump kick. I mean, basically what came with it baked in was attack.
Yeah.
But where I was, actually, I think it was Jeremy that had it like probably a week and a half ago. Sorry to call you out. But you had like a screen filled of all kinds of interactions. So I guess I was just looking for some help in trying to figure out how to do some other interactions with this. And the only thing I had come up with this far was adding this jump kick. And so I added self kick there. But, is there some way then to interact this pirate and the ninja?
Sure. Well, so let me ask you this: what is the assignment? Is this the extent of what the assignment asks you to do, or does it say try to figure out some more?
And basically on down here, so the health eventually, I mean, I didn't go that far just because it seemed too simple to me at this point. But eventually you're going to run out of health, and which is points down there in the terminal. And right now there's 50 and 85 for Michelangelo. And I mean, I could just keep hitting put extra functions on there that say, we'll go back to this one, that he jump kick, attack, and we just drain one or the other of them out of health. But there's part of me that was like, okay, well, what if I wanted to add more strength or?
Oh yeah, well, yeah, then, I mean, it's essentially, it looks like you're understanding the basic concepts of classes and having functions and attributes, and that these methods can update the values in the attributes. So, I mean, that's essentially the thing. So then it's really just a matter of how creative you can get with it. I mean, if attack subtracts health, you could make a revive method. If someone, you could say, give them another 20 health, or, give them other attributes. I don't know. I mean, you could do something like, let's say you hit 0, you could add an if statement in there that says, if health is 0, then print, you have died, try again, or something like that. So revive. So all right, so then that would be, instead of minus equal, that would be a plus equal. And yeah, now that you have this stuff set up, I mean, that's really the important piece to figure out. After that, it's a question of how creative you get with it. But the important thing is that you've got a class of Ninja that you can replicate. You can create as many instances of it as you want. It's got a constructor function, and it's set up with 5 different attributes at this point, and then methods that allow you to interact with those attributes. That's the crucial thing. After that, you can pretty much do anything. And then it's a question of, you can get more complex interactions between different types of classes, right? Between a ninja and a is there a pirate class, or is it
Yeah, there's a pirate and a ninja.
pirate ninja? Yeah.
Basically, I just played with the ninja side. I mean, it could be duplicated on the pirate side, but
Mhm.
okay. All
Yeah.
right.
So it looks like you've got the coding portion down, and the next step is more like getting into game development almost. Seems to me.
All right. And these other parts that came with it, those
Uh-huh.
don't do anything, do they? It's
Yeah, you don't need to touch. You don't need to touch those.
Can I ask a question? Why is the health not, like pirate stat health is not pulling? Like the health is white, which means it's not really gonna pull anything, right?
I'm not sure about that. It looks like
With classes, you really can't listen to that if it's white or not, because it'll still pull it.
Yeah, I
Right.
had some confusion with my color coding and my VS Code as well. And I think sometimes it just doesn't necessarily represent like what you think it would based on like context from other examples. That was a horribly constructed sentence, but I think you get what I'm saying.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Well, like for instance, Mike, can you comment out line 8 for a second? And,
Okay.
and save it. I don't know if this, I'm just trying to see if this will,
I mean, it's just auto save, but
oh, okay. Okay, so I was just gonna see if it caused an error. I guess it doesn't. But it seems like it does, yeah, so you can uncomment that, but it seems like it's printing out, so. Have you tested whether these attack functions do what you're wanting them to do?
yeah, and the
They do it?
jump kick did it, yeah.
Great, okay,
So,
then,
All
yeah,
right.
cool.
So
okay.
Looking
Well,
at it,
since we're,
sorry.
Yeah.
Looking at it, I think I
had
know
a
why.
question on-
Sorry.
What? Oh, I'm still, I
What's that?
have a question on
Go
MySQL, if I'm still on the,
Sure,
and I don't know if I actually did this one right today, because I was trying to find and understand the definition on these relationships here.
uh-huh,
And so looking around and couldn't find something to tell me what these actually, why a solid line versus the dash line.
gotcha. Can you share that screen you're mentioning, or we're still
Okay,
seeing the
sorry.
VS Code?
Let's see, go back to,
You may have to reshare if you have multiple screens, or,
yeah, that's my problem. Oh, there it is, hiding over there. All right, now it should
Cool.
be.
Mhm.
Oh, sorry. So what I was looking at was these connectors here,
yeah,
and the definitions are kind of vague.
gotcha. So actually, I'm not entirely sure the difference between the dotted and the solid. What I will say, if I was going to create a table, I'd probably use the solid ones. Although I don't know, if you hover over them, does it say new
Yeah.
one to many? And that now hover over the dotted version of that?
And then that's a non-identifying relationship.
Non-identifying. I'm not sure what the difference is there. I'll have to look into that. I would go by the solid ones, but these represent the different types of relationships. So the one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many.
And so many to many is just this, well, this one here with
Mhm.
the N to M.
Yep. Yeah, and it looks like you've set, is that what you've set up here? Or
Yeah,
yeah, right.
all right. Another question I had on this was when the date time first comes up,
Mhm.
it comes up with parentheses.
Uh-huh.
Here, we'll just do another one here for just, or we'll just replace it here.
Uh-huh.
And if it used the baked in one, and it wasn't, so now it looks like it seems like it added mine. But what originally it was coming up with this parentheses here,
Uh-huh.
and when I wanted to get past there, it was like, where would you put that data type? And so what I figured out was I could just type my own date time
Yeah,
and
and that works.
and not have the parentheses. Oh, okay, thought I was kind of just faking it there.
Yeah, I think that's okay. I think as you're like, navigating around Workbench for the first, while, you can kind of fake it a bit and see if it, play around with what works and what doesn't. I'm not sure why the one with the parentheses, I mean, the parentheses usually denotes that it's a method or a function of some kind. But I think I think just the word daytime, usually when I build a database, that's what I see. So if that's what's showing up is working, I'd say, if it's not broke, don't fix it at this point.
Okay, and
I
then
don't think you'll have to worry too much about that difference.
then I noticed on the video that he put a expression in the default field over here of something like now.
Uh-huh.
It seemed, but what does that do? Does
Now,
that create like a date function?
yeah, now is a function that returns the current time. So what you'll end up using it for is when you create a SQL query to add a new row into in one of your tables. Let's say your author has a created at field and an updated at field, for instance. You can pass the now function into your SQL query as the value you want to place at that column, at the created at column, and it will return to you the date and time at the exact time that it was created. So that's something you will end up using.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Yeah. I mean, SQL seemed interesting.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, and it's super
Maybe it was
crucial.
somewhat relatable from a Excel standpoint, as they pointed out. So
Mhm.
there was something there that way. All right.
I don't know if I'm going crazy, but I think there was an explanation somewhere about identifying and non-identifying relationships. That might be what you're looking at when it comes to like the dotted line items.
Oh yeah, it looks like Chris, thanks for posting this. Let's see what this article says. Chris posted an article about it in the chat, so you can look at.
Stack Overflow rarely fails.
But everyone else does, and that's why we go there.
Word.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. So yeah, cool. Identifying, not
Now I'm trying to get back to-
identifying, I don't know that it'll, in my experience, that hasn't come up, but it's always good to stay curious and keep learning. Great. Does that kind of answer your questions, Mike? More or less for now?
Yeah, it's good.
Great.
I was trying to get back to where the chat was.
Cool.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, great. Anyone else?
I think Jeremy was going to say something about why certain words were popping up as white
Hmm.
in that VS Code, and I was kind of curious to see what the thought was on that.
So
Unless I'm
I'm-
mistaken, Jeremy.
yeah, so I'm not sure if I'm correct on it, but the way he had that set up was he was looking inside of the ninja class. And so the ninja class is linked with the main like file, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Mhm.
And then the pirate class was its own file, which is also connected to the main. So there's not really a connect or a direct connection between pirate and ninja. And so I think that's why it's whited out. But
Mhm.
with how it maps is it does go through the main and then to pirate and then back. And so I think that's why it's white, because there's no direct connection.
Right. So while we're on that file, maybe it's not reading it, but it runs it properly. That's what you're saying?
Yes. And hopefully that wasn't too confusing.
Yep. Cool.
Did that help whoever asked?
Yeah,
Oh,
thank
yeah,
you.
that was good. Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
How's everyone feeling about SQL queries at this point?
I hated it at first. And then after I took a week off and I came back, I got back into it and it seemed easier after I got back into it. But
Nice.
now I'm past it and we'll see when I get back into it how it goes.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, it's amazing how much more fun things are when you understand them. Yeah. Let's see.
So we'll get into like something goes into that SQL and we're going to ask for it to come back. Is that what the that next section is?
Yeah, so I mean, MySQL is your database and your tables are how you're structuring your data. And you're going to make queries. Ultimately, you're going to be making queries from a Flask application, and you're going to be making queries to your SQL database, which is going to specify what type of data you want to get. And then MySQL sends you that data, and you can also put data into the database. Is that kind of answering your question?
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I'm used to working with out in the big world was a database, and I never understood how they got to the database. That's what
right. Yeah, that will become more clear, the actual path to the database once we get more into Flask.
And Flask basically is.
Flask is like a Python framework that's going to kind of help us organize all of our code. It's going to help us organize pages, HTML pages that we see, as well as help us create functionality so that if we click on different URLs for our sites, we're going to get different data back. So it's a framework, it's a structure for and that's how we're going to end up building full web frameworks. You've got HTML pages, you've got data that you're drawing from MySQL using queries. That's going to I kind of think it's coming up from SQL and then kind of presented on the HTML page, depending on what you click. And then there's another kind of back-end layer that's dealing with functionality and controlling what data you're grabbing from the database and when. So it may or may not make a lot of sense right now. That's kind of a pretty broad overview.
Okay.
But the idea will be you'll essentially organize and program specific routes at different URLs that you go to. It's going to send a request and then a MySQL query to the database, grab certain data and bring it back. So there's a lot there, but
So Flask is just in a sense a big pool where all these different files and exist.
yeah. I would think of it like maybe a skeleton almost, like a certain, plus some other built, there's a lot of like built-in functionality that helps make the whole process easier.
Okay.
Mhm. How's everyone feeling about like classes, the classes and the like the Pirate Ninja kind of stuff?
I feel like I just gotta drill it a little bit more,
Mhm.
Like I get the concepts, especially when I'm in it and I'm doing it,
Mhm.
but because I'm trying to stay on track with the pace of everything, so I
Yeah.
kind of usually just kind of like do it and I jump to the next thing. But in one of the videos they even touched upon it. They're like, oh, we know that the pace is so quick that you probably have to go back and like just refresh a lot. So
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the classes thing took me a minute too. It's I don't know. I like trying to break down the concept because I think it doesn't have to be too crazy, but I mean, and I'm sure it's been said to you guys as well, but like I don't know, a class is a blueprint. Same way a function is a blueprint. If anyone's spoken about it in those terms, a class is a blueprint for making objects. Objects can have attributes and they can have methods. And then, we create, there's the constructor method, the init method, as our way to create new instances of that object. Then within that, there is some confusing, like there's different ways to set it up. What do you pass into the function? What is already built into the class? But those are the main things I would say. Objects with attributes and functions or methods, you'd call them.
Actually, I'd be willing to share the screen again, but that's where sometimes these terms, because like even as Chris was saying, I think that it really just comes down to practice and familiarity.
Yeah.
And sometimes all the terms, and then looking at the error in Visual Studio, you go, oh, okay, what is that? What's it trying to tell me?
Right.
And so I guess there's sometimes it's just familiarity with the terms and what it is that I should be looking for. And so
yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you'd like to share your screen again, we can kind of try and refresh a little bit.
That's fine with me.
Yeah, and I think that is a big part of it too. I actually feel this way about pretty much anything you're trying to learn. There's always just kind of a threshold of understanding the lingo, because maybe if they didn't use a new word for it, you'd say, oh, that's just this other thing I already know. Or so right. So we've got our class here, and so the class is the blueprint for making new objects. Here's your constructor method. All of our methods take in the self as input. That helps the object know which object you're pointing to. It's always pointing to the specific instance you're dealing with. Now in this case, so this is our constructor. Self always gets passed, but we can also add different values in. So here we have name. So what we're saying there is, after we're done building this blueprint, we're going to have to actually create a new instance. And when we do that, to create it, it's going to expect that we pass a name into the function. It's going to expect, it's always going to expect a name. And if we don't pass it a name, there's going to be a problem, because we've here on line 3 specified we're always expecting to pass in a name. And whatever we pass in here is then going to get stored here. Now, these are your attributes. These over here are all hard coded, which means no matter what, no matter how many instances you make, they're all going to have a strength of 10 or a kick of 20 or a speed of 5. Now, that's why passing stuff into the constructor is cool, because then you can make changes and you can have slight differences between your classes. So this one, you know, we could say that if you just put in a string here and said Mike, then every single object you made would be called Mike, which then is, you know, maybe confusing or not as useful as having different names. So this constructor is crucial. We have our methods down here, and each of these methods interacts with the attributes and allows you to manipulate that data or update that data in different ways. And right, like here, we're passing in these attributes to a string and we're printing it out so that we can see what's being stored here. So these attributes, I always also think about like data in memory that's associated with a specific object. So all of these things, so again, attributes, methods, those are essentially the two things that you have if you really break it down. They can all do, you know, you can call them different things, but that's what you have. And so then again, this whole thing is the blueprint. And now you have a really simple, it's really easy to just make as many as you need at this point. In this case, passing in different names. So each of them can have a different name. So now you can just say, is it new Ninja in Python? Is that JavaScript? How do you create a new one?
Whether you would just create a new one on
You have it in that
oh, it's
game.
probably like, so if you go to the game,
Yep.
and then you got
Right,
here.
there you go. Yep. Right.
And so you could have whatever, can't think of a pirate right now, Blackbeard or something. And
Yep.
so,
Right. And it's really that simple, which is nice.
yeah, but the other side, they're not individual, like, so like, if I had pirate up here now, but instead of this ninja, you had some other ninja. I can't think of a ninja name right now. So I guess all ninjas are always going to have these attributes.
Yep.
Until I come over here and I go instead of Michelangelo, Picasso equals ninja.
Right.
And so, but he's going to have all those same attributes that was on this file.
Right. If you've created a ninja, it's going to have all those ninja attributes. If you've created a pirate, it's going to have all the pirate attributes. So it's good to always say, okay, I created this. If you're ever unsure of what it has access to, what attributes or methods, you can always go back to the class. Because again, it's your map and blueprint for, oh, this is all the stuff that I have available to me. I can run these methods and I can access these attributes.
Well, then the other thing that just besides the words and the fact that, you know, this kind of threw me for a time is this to write attack here. It's like,
Mhm.
where did that come from?
Well, that's just,
You know, I just-
that's
you just make it up.
Yeah, you just make it up. There's a lot of things like that where you have to know, figure out over the time the difference between this is like a keyword, maybe it's built into the language and you always have to use this word versus these are variable names and it could be called anything, right? So attack is just the name we're giving this function because it's mimicking the idea of attacking a person, right? They'll lose some health. And we've built that in code where we've essentially, mimicked that kind of behavior in code. So say, okay, when we attack someone, they lose health. If we jump kick, they're also going to lose some health. Right. So yeah, that's an important piece too. Just kind of, okay, differentiating between this is like, we always have to use the def, keyword to say we're creating a function, but show stats, attack, jump kick, those could be anything. And then, but again, once you create them in the class to run them, you just have to remember what the names are later on.
And then what's the difference on this has self and another ones we were using had user?
Do you have an example of that in this or?
No, not in
this
one.
If in another instance, it might, I'm not sure. I'd have to see the specific.
Like in the whole bank account one, there was
Oh, right. So
user and self. And
right. So that would have to do with, again, the way you can connect classes. So if let's say a user has a bank account as an attribute, you can have an attribute that is that holds another instance of a class. So that's another situation where you can use user.bank account. If you say user.bank account, you're starting with the user class, you are going into the bank account object instance that's with an attribute in the user class, and then you can access from within that all of the stuff associated to the bank account class. So that's has to do with another way of associating classes together and being able to kind of cross use the data inside of them.
So could you think of user as like a bigger, like, so in the case of the bank, there's many users, and yet self is a more individual?
Self is the most individual. You would, but even if you had a bank account by itself, you'd be using self. And again, it has to do with how you're calling the function. So after you've created the blueprint and you've created instances, then you're going to maybe say, okay, ninja1 no, self is what you use inside of the blueprint, and user or these other things are what you would use when you were then running instances of these methods or functions in the class. So self is part of the blueprint. Self is always referencing this instance within the class. So you don't use, after you've created the blueprint, you don't really use self again, I don't think, when you're creating instances and running functions. Does that kind of make sense? It's a little hard to explain fully. That's another whole kind of piece of understanding classes, but
it goes back to, in a sense, learning the terminology and practicing using the words. So
I can kind of put some clarity there.
Cool.
Sorry guys, I'm a little bit late. Hello. Self is what is referring to a particular instance, right? So here I've got this blueprint of my Ninja. This is very generic. Every Ninja has this information. This is the default value that we have done, right? What this self refers to is the particular instance I'm talking about. So if I create a new Ninja like you had Michelangelo, right? And it runs, you said, Mike, I'm just going to say Michael equals ninja. Then you had the, I'm gonna put just the name right there. You're calling this ninja, and we've talked about how this, when you call the class name and you put the parentheses, what that does is it runs our init, also called a constructor, right? In another language, it's called a constructor. So like if you think of Java, if you ever take Java, it's going to be known as a constructor, but we call it init here in Python. So when I run my class name, and then I put the parentheses and I put the values needed. So in this case, all it needs is name in order to run. It goes and it runs this initializer, this initializing method. What this initializing method does is it says, okay, I've got the attribute of name, strength, kick, speed, health. So where when I pass in this value, going back to our Michelangelo, I'm saying that instance of my ninja, not all instances, but this particular instance, the name is going to be Michelangelo. Self is what we use to identify and say this particular instance. If you remember back in JavaScript, when we were dealing with buttons and we were dealing with the DOM, if I just said, on click, and then I talked about there was a button. If I clicked any button, something would happen. But what if I only wanted something to happen if a certain button was clicked? That's where this idea, and I would say this button. Self acts sort of the same way. It's saying this instance of Ninja. It's not any other instance. It's not all instances of Ninja, but only this particular one. Do I want to have a name of Michelangelo? And then I do have these default values. So in theory, these are, to everybody else, but just that particular one, I still have to say this ninja's strength is 10. Its kick is 20, et cetera, et cetera. Then we have something here called an instance method, right? You don't have to have a decorator for it, but we have this instance method here. What this does is this is saying a particular instance, only a ninja, right, can show stats. And it has to be an instance that's calling it, right? So let's say Michelangelo wants to see their stats. Well, Michelangelo can show stats. It can call the show stats, right? And it will take in self, which says, I only want you to show my stats, only mine, not everybody else's, not anybody else's, just mine. So it takes in self of whoever called it, right? Which was Michelangelo. And then it's going to put his name, strength, speed, health. Then there's another one we have called a class method. That's where you've seen the decorator that has the @ symbol, and then it says class method. That is a type of method that is not associated to a particular instance. That it just is something that is only associated to the class as a whole. It's going to make a lot more sense when we do Flask plus MySQL. You can sort of think about it is, let's say I've got a ninja and I've got a database and I want to retrieve all ninjas from my database. Right? Let's say I want to show that on my front screen. Well, it's not going to be a particular user, right? It's not tied to a particular user. I just want to be able to show all of my ninjas. So that's what we would call a class method. Right? It's not tied to a particular instance. It's not Michelangelo attacking. I just want to show all ninjas. Right? And so it is still a method associated to my ninja class, but it's not a particular instance that's calling it. If it's an instance that's calling it, we pass in self. If it's a class that's calling it, or if it's a class method, we type in CLS. And so again, self is what we use to identify who's attacking, which ninja is wanting to attack, which ninja is wanting to jump kick, which ninja is wanting to show their stats. And then we say, okay, it's Michelangelo saying show stats. Well, give me Michelangelo's name only. Give me Michelangelo's strength. And because it's self, I'm just getting Michelangelo's speed and Michelangelo's health. Does that make more sense?
Yeah.
Perfect. How are we feeling about OOP? I guess would be a main question to ask. because I feel like quite a few students are still sort of struggling with it. Okay. Can I ask what is it that we're struggling with? So that way I can tailor it and sort of teach, what is needed? Or is it just in general, it just doesn't make sense?
For me, I had problems understanding the question they was asking for. So I didn't really know how to set up the class and everything.
Or which assignment?
That was the
Is it bank account or users with bank accounts?
I think it was users of bank accounts.
Okay, let's look at it and just talk more theory.
I was having trouble with it, like, because when we learned about class and then we did the next assignment, we didn't even really use class for that assignment, which I got confused. I was trying really hard to like implement class into it. But then when I looked at the answers, it's like the I don't know. I just thought it was more different from what I was expecting. That's all.
Okay. Sure, so just looking at this. We're looking here. At this assignment, we are declaring, right? We want to create a application that can allow us to create a bank account, right? And so here I am defining my class. And the way I define it is I just say class. Now class is a keyword in Python to let us know we're creating a class. You might also hear it heard as a model, right? And we'll call that in Flask, but a class and a model, it's a blueprint of what we're going to use from an object perspective. Then again, we've got our init function, also called a constructor, right? This is what actually builds an instance of my class. This builds an instance of my bank account in this particular aspect, right? In order for that to work, and this is something that's super important, I think some people are struggling with, and it always takes himself. Always will you take in self with an it. Here, this int rate and balance are two values that we are saying in order for my constructor to run, in order for me to build this version of bank account, I must be given an interest rate and a balance. I have to be. Like, it will not work if that's not the case. Let's just actually do this. Let's take this code and we'll just build out bank account real quick. We'll just build this out real quick. And there's a great video on the last office hour if you guys were here. Okay. Here, I've got my class bank account. What is going on here? Why is that,
All their codes, for some reason, when you copy it, always has that error on it for
Yeah.
Python for some reason.
Oh, weird.
I think this error because your function is still empty, but when we start to put anything, I think it will go through.
Sure. So I could say. Just gets rid of those pesky little. I'm not sure why the init function wasn't working though. Maybe just because it doesn't do anything. Okay, get rid of that. Okay, this is just saying now you have a method that's not literally doing anything. Okay, so here I've created this class, right, of bank account. And now here's my constructor, here's my init. And what I'm saying is, in order for this to be created, I must be given an interest rate and a balance. So if I were to say checking equals bank account, I have to give it an interest rate and a balance. If I do this, it's going to give me an error because it's saying in order for me to create it, I must be given an interest rate and a balance. So what I have to do is I have to say 0.01, comma, 0, right? To where I want you to start with a 1% or 0.01% balance. And then interest rate, and then the balance is going to start at 0. So now this will work, right? I have the necessary tools in order to build my init. Where I would say self dot interest int rate equals the int rate that they pass through. So I'm gonna say int rate. And then I'm going to say self dot balance equals balance. Balance. Again, what's passed through? If this was unicorn, then I would have to say unicorn. These don't change. What the heck? All right, these don't matter. Right now, it's these guys. This on my left side is my attribute. That is what I'm defining. Balance int rate. Whatever's on the right is arbitrary. If this was X and Y, that's not great, right? You wanna like make your code readable. But just to show you, you could do that. So now if I were to call bank account, this would create my checking. If I wanted, let's say, to not have to pass that in, I could say something like this. Could say equals 0.01 and equals 0. And now what would happen is if I don't pass anything through, it's going to take these default values and apply them here. But if I do, let's say I get a terrible loan and it's at 0.5%, I could pass in 0.5 and it will take this place because it's the first one. I cannot just put 500 because I want to balance. It's going to assume that that's your int rate. I could say something like this. Pass that through and that would be fine. If it's not the first one, right? And they are default values, I do have to specify which one. But if I were to run this, now I would have a bank account that still has an interest rate of 0.01, but my balance would actually start at 500 versus starting at 0. Well, let's not have that. And let's just say, you could also say, it's sort of redundant. Doesn't necessarily, you don't have to do that. You just do 0.01 and 500 if you wanted. So now this is my construct. This is calling, right? Because I called bank account, I called my class. It's running this init method. It's taking in the two values I've given it and setting this particular instance of my bank account is going to have an interest rate of 0.01 and a balance of 500. Then what I could do is I could deposit. So I could just say self dot balance, right? Because if I deposit, my balance is going to go up plus equals, that's just me adding, and then amount. I get amount because I'm saying if I am going to run this deposit method, I must know what amount I am depositing. I have to know what amount I'm depositing, right? I can't just run this deposit if I don't have a number. Because what if I give it 500 and then it just deposits 0, right? I've given it 500, but nothing goes up on my balance. So I do have to give it, how much do you want to deposit? Same sort of thing with withdrawal. Let's say self dot balance minus equals, because I'm now withdrawing, I'm taking. How much am I taking out? Well, whatever the amount being passed info is. Great question. This amount could be unicorn. It could be whatever we want to call it. The only keywords we're really dealing with here are self, def, and class. Now, let's say I did have a class method that, let's say I had some variable that said var equals, this is a class variable. Well, let's say I just wanted to be able to see what my secret message is. Oh yeah, the init is absolutely, you do have to do dunder init. That is built in. Let's say I just wanted to do this, whatever this var is, right? Well, I don't need an instance, right? Because it doesn't matter who's calling it or what is calling it. I don't need a particular instance to do this. That's where class method can come in. So I have what we call a decorator, right? Anytime I do this @ sign and Python, we call this a decorator. And then I'm going to say def secret word. Now, because this is a class, instead of taking in self, I take in CLS. Only because this is a class method. And then I would say print CLS dot var. This class, right? CLS takes in this particular classes, and then there's something called var, right? Which is a variable, a value just associated with the class, not a particular instance, right? This has nothing to do with any particular instance. This is my secret word or secret phrase. Be a better statement. So what I could do is, okay, I've created my checking, right? And then I could call this actual class method where I could say bank account dot secret phrase. And if I were to, those are printing, let me run my terminal. It prints out my secret phrase. It's not associated with a particular class, right? But let's say I did want to see what this self thing is, and then we'll finish it up here. Let's say I just wanted to display account info. If I wanted to print self dot balance, right? That's what I want to do. I want to see my balance. I first have to make an instance. In this case, I've got my checking, right? Checking equals this instance. So checking is going to be my keyword here. So I could say checking dot display account info. Just comment this out. And now what it's going to do is when this calls, it's going to take the instance that's calling it, in this place checking. It's going to come here. It's going to take in that particular instance. And it's going to say that particular instance's balance is what is going to be printed, which we see should be 500 here. So if I were to have my terminal, shouldn't have closed that. We see 500. Now, if my checking dot deposit, right? If let's say my checking account and I deposit 500, then I run this guy again. We should see that it should change from 500 and then it should say 1,000. Yeah, because that particular instance's balance checking increased by 500 here. And then I can reprint my information and now my balance has increased. Does that make more sense? Any questions before we start class?
So personally, I find that my problem is sometimes I don't expect us to like get into this before
Sure.
class because we don't have a lot of time, but
Yeah.
it's hard for me to remember how to like call a function. And I don't know, I mean, I guess that's just gonna have to come with practice and
Mhm.
like constantly referencing Google and stuff. Like, I guess I just mean like the syntax. Sometimes it's hard to remember like period. And then like, you know, if you have like functions within dictionaries, you have to remember, or I mean, functions calling upon dictionaries, you have to remember how to get to the certain variable. So since you were asking earlier about like what's been difficult for us, I'd say that that's kind of been a thing for me, but I imagine it's just a matter of practicing more.
Yeah, and that is a case. I would encourage you. I know that you sent me an email. I have seen it. But yeah, let's work on maybe even if there's a way that I can, send a video or something that can help you understand, maybe we can exchange that way. But yeah, no, it does come with practice. I would say that that is a hard thing. Working through that, like functions intermediate is an important one to kind of walk through, because you do really start dealing with dictionaries. And then there is a great office hour from last week right here that is on OOP and how you would pass in a dictionary and how a class takes in a dictionary and walks through all that. So Bill did this one. It's a great video. Bill's awesome. So it's an hour long. He's really, really great. So that is another tool for you as well.
Yeah, I was there for that, but it definitely is worth looking into again for sure. So I'll probably,
Absolutely.
yeah. And I'll probably just like arrange a one-on-one with you at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Okay, friends.
I
Go
have a
ahead.
question about the calendar real quick.
Yeah.
On last Friday, I think it was, if you scroll up. No.
It had the intro to Flask video.
Yes.
Yeah, that was misplaced. I changed that
Okay.
today.
Okay, yeah, because I was trying to click on it to watch it and nothing
Yeah.
was coming up. Like I didn't have a link or anything. So
Yeah, that's something we're gonna talk about here. I think I'm gonna kind of alter this calendar a little bit. So yeah,
Okay.
good catch though. Cool. Let me get recording and then we will get started.